Good evening, everyone. I'll call to order our workshop for November 27th, 2017. And if I could have a motion regarding Mr. Jones. Mr. Marriott.
Yes, I move that we excuse Mr. Jones from tonight's meeting.
All votes are cast. Mr. Jones is actually in China, so he thought it might be a little difficult to be here. All votes cast. That passes 6-0. Thank you. We're going to begin our workshops tonight with the Arvada Center Master Plan Review and Update. Is that the order we're going in?
Actually, Mr. Mayor, we're going to start with the Arvada Urban Renewal Update.
You know what? I've got the old agenda.
Yeah.
Sorry. The Arvada Urban Renewal Update.
Yeah.
And I understand Fred Jacobson's going to kick it off.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council. Thanks for the opportunity to come before you tonight to give you an update of our urban renewal activities. Specifically, we're going to give you a briefing on our Ralston Creek project. And I'm going to turn the meeting over to Maureen Fair, our Executive Director.
Very good. We thought it would be good to have these updates, some of them on camera, some we'll do upstairs, but just so that we can make sure that the community and council is fully apprised of what's going on with urban renewal. So, Ms. Fair.
Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. Hi, Dot. Nice to have you. So we are here, as we said, to give you guys an update on our activities. So we want to spend this evening really talking about Ralston Creek. So I thought I'd start out with some before pictures because I always think it's good to go back and remember how things were before. This was Arvada Plaza just a few short years ago. And here is what it looks like today. This is the Super Walmart project. And if you look at this, if you remember, our only mission is to remediate blight. So if you look at this picture, and especially the one on the top on the right there with all the trees, that is the back, the side and the back of Walmart. Look at how landscape that is, and look at they put in a stairway in order to help the neighbors on that side be able to come in and access the shopping. So this was really the catalyst, our first project in this area. From this project, we now have a lot more energy, a lot more vibrancy in the area, and we're also able then to take this and start on our second project, which again, here are some before pictures. There were 4 buildings directly on the corner of Ralston and Independence, and we are replacing those 4 buildings with 4 new buildings. And I went out this morning, and here are some very hot off the press pictures. So these 4 buildings, what's really special about these is the streetscape. So look at the sidewalks. One of the issues that the citizens have had problems with are the sidewalks along Ralston Road. And these sidewalks are extremely wide. And if you notice, they are separated from the street with a really wide planting area. So it really feels safe to walk there. And we also have pedestrian lights. So if you see there, not only do we have street lights, but we have these really pretty ornamental pedestrian lights, which make it safe. You feel light, you feel safe from the traffic. Also, the buildings are extremely attractive. That wood is just beautiful. And we have the branding with the Ralston Creek signage there. Here's an aerial view of how the 4 buildings are positioned. And here are the tenants of those buildings to date. The first one there, Arvada Liquor Mart, that exists today in the Arvada Square building right now, and they closed, I believe, yesterday, and are taking the next 2 weeks to move into the new building. So they are in there right now dismantling all of their coolers and moving them into this site. They are hoping to reopen on December 11th. These other businesses are in there right now doing their tenant improvements as well. They're not going to be open as quickly as that. I think probably first quarter is a good guess for Tokyo Joe's, Five Guys Burgers, Mod Pizza, Pepper Jack Grill, Wingstop, Tropical Smoothie Cafe, Lady Jane's Haircut for Men. There's also about 5 additional leasing opportunities remaining. So phase 2 of Ralston Creek is the redevelopment of the former Safeway and the Arvada Square. So that got kind of messed up a little bit. So you know that the Safeway has already been demoed. Right now, if you were to go out there, the environmental remediation has started on Arvada Square, and they will be doing that for the next month or so. And we also have the fencing around the old Ralston Road Cafe, and they're hoping to have that demoed by the end of this year. And once the abatement and the utilities are disconnected from Arvada Square, we will have that demoed. And we think that'll happen probably first quarter. That then, by having all those buildings removed, we now set the stage for phase 2. And phase 2, the plan for phase 2 is residential. So we have a master developer for the entirety of Ralston Creek North, which was the shops at Ralston Creek and the residential. He is looking for a multifamily development company to partner with. So we're now on to our 4th developer for phase 2. This has been hard. Doing the multifamily piece for this project is very complicated, so we're now actively out looking for our 4th developer. There are a lot of constraints to the phase 2. One of those is, the Van Bibber easement goes through there, and the Van Bibber easement you cannot build a building on, and you can't plant a tree on. You can put a street, you can put parking, you can put grass. So it creates some challenges to the site plan. Also, the floodplain was able to take that area, or the Van Bibber took the area out of the floodplain. However, there is some of the floodplain that remains on the northern part there that dips down, which means you cannot build a building or plant a tree in that area either. We are requiring them to build an east-west new road that's going to run horizontally in the property that is taking up space. Also, just the city's parking requirements and park fees have added a challenge for the developers in order for them to get their pro forma to work. But all that being said, we are still optimistic that we are going to be able to find a developer that can work with all that and find a way to get some multifamily on that site. So tonight, it's kind of exciting for our urban renewal. We are debuting a new program that we're doing, and we're calling it Community Spotlight. This is basically stories of collaboration and success. So the background on this is really that for the last 30 years, Aura has partnered with small businesses and community leaders. It is this partnership that has allowed Aura to help improve our city's tax base, our roads and sidewalks, the public safety, also enabled to do all the recreational and cultural amenities that we've done. And this work would not be possible without the hard work and partnership of our community members. So this really is about recognizing that. So what we've done then is we've created this series that are going to share these stories. And then what it will also do, it will further explain the work that Aura does across the city. And what we, Aura, want to do is continue to work to make these partnerships to make Arvada a great place to live, work, and play. So with that being said, we want to show you our first installment.
We've been in business for 2 years, and this area came open, and it's so nice down here. We were looking for a bigger space, and so here we found this awesome place, and we love it here. We're really fortunate because this was part of the redevelopment of Aura. They've done a great job. We've got the Hilton Hotel over here, and so guests come here from all over the country, plus Colorado. People stay here, they come right by our store, they come in, they shop, they spend their local dollars here. We feel so fortunate to be next to the hotel, and then we send them on their way up into Old Town to enjoy shopping and eating and all the other establishments that are up there. In addition to the hotel, Aura did a great job building all these condos within walking distance of downtown. And so people love the fact that they don't have to drive, that they can walk and get dinner or go have a beer or go have ice cream. And for us, for our location, everybody walks right by and then back by.
As well as the traffic that comes from right around the Hilton here in the condos, we've had and established a clientele that comes from all over the surrounding area of Arvada.
We wouldn't be here without Aura, because when we knew we had to move from the old space, we looked and looked and looked. We wanted to have a bigger space. There wasn't really anything in Old Town because it's smaller. And we found the space and we were all excited, and we put a bid in and we, talked to the property manager, and it came back, nope, you're a consignment. We don't want to work with you. And at our request, Aura actually wrote a really nice letter to the property owner and said that we would add value to their property, we add value to Old Town. There isn't anything like our store in the area, and we were a credible business.
I mean, literally, we would maybe not be still in this Old Town area if it weren't for Aura.
All of the merchants down here, we all kind of work together. We want to make sure that when people come to Old Town and Arvada, that they have a wonderful experience. We want them to come back because they spend their money here. They spend their money at our store. They spend their money at the restaurants. They spend their money at other retail stores. I think Aura has done a fabulous job trying to take blighted areas and turn them into a productive, robust, vibrant area, and we definitely are feeling that. So there's a lot going on down here. People love being down here. They like being part of the vibrancy, the vibe, and we're so excited to be a part of that as well.
This particular video is kind of a result of the information that we have heard from you, the business community, city staff, and even our own board members about doing a better job of communicating our role in the community. And we have taken several steps, the video being one. We've now worked on a new Facebook page to kind of improve our communications there. In addition, we're putting our board meetings, the recordings, on our website so they are accessible to any citizen. We are working on expanding our signage on our projects that we're doing, that it is actually an urban renewal project. I believe it says in partnership with Aura. And we're working on our stories in the Arvada report. And also we're providing these updates to City Council. And we think this is a valuable part of trying to, not only reach you, but to reach the rest of the community about our role in our community. And we'll keep it nice and simple. So we're looking forward to doing our next update and continuing those communications with City Council and with the citizens. If you have any questions, we're here to answer anything. Otherwise, we'll see you at the next update meeting.
Very good. Mr. McGough?
Yes, thank you. I just have a question that's related to Ralston Fields and the old Arvada Square. I'm wondering whether the project that we have that's in place now with urban drainage and with the Corps of Engineers to do some work on Ralston Creek just north there, will that take any of that property out of the floodplain, and will that have any beneficial impact on the development there?
It's all downstream, right?
All that, as much of that area that's out of the floodplain is already out. So just by doing that, took that part out. That remaining piece will remain.
So that section of the creek that actually runs east-west, just north of the old Chuck E. Cheese
Right.
area, that won't
Not
change
that I
enough
know
to.
of.
Oh, okay.
We've asked.
Okay. Yeah. Too bad. But that'll be that will make a very nice, with the residential looking out onto that creek area. That should be very nice.
Right, and we're asking the whoever's going to do that to beautify that part of the creek, because you know how just to the east is Ralston Central Park, and you see how gorgeous they've made that part of the creek. Well, we have to work within the confines of how that looks, but they can still landscape it and terrace it a little bit better, so they're going to make that much nicer. We also want them to make kind of a public access on that south side. You know how they've got the trail on the north side. We want to have the public be able to come and see it from the north or the south as well. And just one one comment that I meant to say is that video that was done by an Arvada small business.
Mr. Marriott?
Thank you. Thank you for the update of kind of what's been going on up to here. Do you have for us just kind of a sneak peek of you know, what, you know, it was good telling us what's up to here, but what about from here looking forward over the next couple months? Anything of note that may show up?
Are you talking specifically about the residential portion?
Well, in any part of that, but no, not necessarily the residential portion, but just is there any
Okay, well, on the
things
business,
to watch out for?
on the business side, you know, the shops are going to be getting ready to open in the first quarter, so that side's going along quite nicely. Our master developer there, Loftus, is in meetings with another potential developer, and they're trying to move that along. And then that will have to come before our board to see where that goes. And so we'll know a little bit more information, I'll say, you know, late first quarter, about how everything is progressing on that residential side. And then obviously those buildings are going to come down, which I think is going to be a big benefit. You know, right now it's a collection for people to dump trash and graffiti and whatnot, even though, you know, even when the businesses were still operating, that was still happening. So that's going to come all down. We'll get that, you know, leveled out, and hopefully it won't be the eyesore that it is at the present time. And that will be happening, again, kind of at the end of the first quarter. That stuff should kind of level down.
Right. And where will these videos be played? I assume on our website and on the Facebook page?
It'll have access from the Facebook page and our website.
Right. Okay, I don't see any other questions. Thank you for the updates and reports, and keep working on it.
Okay, thank you,
Good.
Mr. Mayor, City
Thank you.
Council.
That's great.
Next, we have the Arvada Center Master Plan Review and Update. Mr. Devon? Mr. Devon's at the podium. That's always a...
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. I want to make sure I can see whatever is coming at me straight on. You know. That's right. So tonight we'll be giving you a report on the Arvada Center Master Plan review and update. A lot of this information was discussed at our November 1st joint meeting with the Arvada Center Board. There is some additional information that's presented in here that reflects the discussion that resulted from that joint meeting that occurred primarily between city staff and Arvada Center for the Arts and Humanities staff. So with that, what prompted this review is the fact that we are now operating the Arvada Center differently through a cooperative agreement. The current master plan was completed in 2001, so I think it's safe to assume that any master plan that's 17 or so years old needs to be updated and reflect any changes. We have updated city capital improvement priorities. And then, you know, my favorite reason for getting something done is because the council included in the 27 update to the strategic plan. So when you guys tell me to do something, I think it's always a good idea for me to follow through on that. Point of discussion, this was a point of discussion during our November 1st joint meeting with the Arvada Center Board. And during that meeting, there was expressed concern regarding the Arvada Center for the Arts and Humanities priorities versus the priorities of Arvada events. Just briefly to review the findings of the 2001 master plan, one of the key findings was to preserve the site. I'm talking about the Arvada Center site for the Arts and Humanities program. Not only just where the building is, but the southern part of that site where now we have outdoor sculpture art. And in fact, the master plan envisions the idea that that site would be available for that kind of display of visual outdoor art. In fact, we also envisioned the idea of that southern site being made into a park to complement arts and humanities programs. We also looked at expanding facilities to provide a new banquet and conference center, as well as a parking structure. That was the thinking back in 2009. And then the existing banquet and conference space would be repurposed for arts and humanities programs. And then one of the things that a number of people remind me about is to provide a new entry at West 69th Avenue, a little further south from the existing entry if you're going southbound on Wadsworth. So we got together, a group of us, which included myself, members of our city staff, our facilities manager, Kim Vager, the facilities manager for the Arvada Center, John Gratkins, and then Philip Sneed, Executive Director, and Clark Johnson, Chief Operating Officer, went to work on looking at the existing master plan and what we would do to update it. And we also relied on the cooperative agreement as one of the guiding documents that represents a big change from what was discussed in 2001. So we removed the consideration of the banquet and conference wing, which was basically a separate facility as part of that master plan. We removed consideration of the parking structure. The reason for the parking structure was that the use of that facility would be significantly expanded and there would be additional parking that would be required. Without the banquet and conference wing, that would not be required, the new parking structure. We assumed the relocation of our Arvada events as expressed in the cooperative agreement. We modified the current banquet center space for use to support the arts and humanities programs. Now, we did not get real specific as to what that would look like. That's still work, in my opinion, that needs to be done. But we had some I think, conceptual assumptions about how that space would be modified. Mainly, we envisioned for arts and humanities classes and programs along those lines. And then also looked outside the building to the amphitheater and improvements such as replacing the grass seating with terrace seating. Also providing a ceramics and dirty art studio, and then miscellaneous infrastructure improvements that would support arts and humanities programs such as storage, upgraded lighting, things along those lines that would be required to support that building becoming more focused, or I would say entirely focused in the future on arts and humanities programs. Now, factored into this whole process was the hospitality study that was presented to the City Council in the summer. And what that study did is it evaluated the feasibility of a standalone conference and event center that would replace the Arvada Center facility. The conclusion was that approximate 19,400 conference facility at the preferred site, and as you recall, that study ranked, I believe, 4 sites. The preferred site was the site at Wadsworth and I-70, and that a banquet facility of that size could be supported, although it would require a significant capital investment. What the report pointed out is that there is a demand for these kinds of facilities in the metro area, and that location, I-70 and Wadsworth, is an ideal location given the confluence of 2 interstates, a state highway, accessibility and visibility show that would be an excellent site for a conference center, and I think that's one of those things that's pretty apparent in the report. The projected capital investment that we discussed with you when this was presented earlier in the summer was $8.25 million, and that did not include land acquisition. So all of this information was kind of factored into the November 1st joint meeting of the City Council and the nonprofit Arvada Center Board of Directors. There was general agreement regarding the revisions to the master plan. I think what we received when we presented that report at that meeting is that there was, you all agreed with the general direction that we presented. There was general agreement with the condition within the cooperative agreement for Arvada events to relocate from the Arvada Center. Some council members identified the need for the Arvada Center to develop plans and costs for the converted space, to really kind of develop a business case for what that would look like and how long it would take over time. And then some board members identified the need for more certainty regarding when the space was available. So in talking this over with my counterpart at the Arvada Center, Philip Sneed, it's kind of a chicken and the egg thing. You know, you have to kind of know when the space would be available in order to figure out when a plan could be more fully developed. There was some agreement regarding the need for the Arvada Center board to control all activities within the building. That was certainly envisioned during a lot of the discussion leading up to the culmination of the cooperative agreement. There was discussion regarding the background of Arvada events, that included past public pressure for an event venue in Arvada. We talked a little bit about the history as to why a function such as Arvada events was put together in the first place and programmed at the Arvada Center. There was discussion regarding the new private sector competition. There are private sector businesses that, such as the Lamar Street Center, that were not in place back when the Arvada Center, when Arvada Events was formed, in the 1990s. And there's also a discussion regarding entrenched community use, impact on committed events, impact on employees. We talked about all of that during the November 1st joint meeting and the need to be sensitive to those concerns. And then there was discussion regarding the spirit of the cooperative agreement and the need for both the city and the Arvada Center to work together. I think it's important to provide a little bit of relevant background information in terms of Arvada events. There is an interconnection between the Arvada Center golf courses and the athletic concessions. Really, all of that forms Arvada events, and these lines of businesses really work together to provide all of the events-related services throughout the year. We also are very much into the pending reopening of Westwoods Golf Club. We envision that golf club being operational in January. The Arvada events staff is pouring a lot of work, heart and soul, if you will, into the opening of that golf course. It will be, we believe, a premier facility with the improvements, $6.5 million or so worth of investment there. Looking forward to getting that opened, and they're very engaged in the plans to make that a successful operation. In 2016, Arvada events business totaled 550 events involving over 177,000 guests at all the venues, and about 57 of those were programmed at the Arvada Center. That generated over $165,000 in sales tax. It certainly is a pretty robust operation. And also of note, between 1998 and 2013, Arvada events transferred nearly $1.3 million to the Arvada Center for the Arts and Humanities operating budget. So that's offered as a reminder of what was done for about 15 years before it ended in 2013. The November 1st meeting between the City Council and the board was a pretty robust discussion. A lot of views exchanged over that. I think we probably spent about an hour or so, maybe more, on discussing the master plan and the push and pull between the arts and humanities programs and the events programs. That discussion was then taken to a staff level discussion between the city staff and the Arvada Center staff. And we had to try to do our best to make sense out of everything that was discussed that night, because there was a lot of really good points made, but some of them were conflicting, if you all remember from that discussion. So some of the takeaways that we discussed when we got together approximately 2 weeks ago was that we acknowledged that the long-term vision to relocate Arvada, that there is a long-term vision to relocate Arvada events from the Arvada Center. We looked at Section 14 of the Cooperative Agreement, which discusses Arvada events, and looked at the language around the scheduling and use of facilities. We acknowledged that there was a previous transfer of funds from banquet operations to arts and humanities, and we looked at other highlights from the November 1st joint meeting. And then we came to a conclusion. That conclusion included that the immediate relocation of Arvada events is not feasible. Right now, just to turn the lights off and stop offering programs and events there for Arvada events is just not possible. Relocation, if feasible, needs to be well planned and phased to minimize impacts on community and employees. Now, those two bullet points I think are important to consider in tandem. One of the things that was mentioned by Gordon Rusick at the joint meeting is that we already have events scheduled clear through 2018. Why? Well, people come to us and they want to schedule their weddings or their business activities or their service club meetings, and absent any formal direction from either me or the city council, or preferably both of us, saying don't schedule anymore from this date forward, the Arvada event staff continue to schedule events. So they're booked well into 2018. In fact, really through 2018, because generally large events book a year in advance. That's how the market works for these kinds of venues. If you go back to the decisions we made with the Arvada Center and converting the Arvada Center from a city operation to a nonprofit organization, we took the better part of 3 years to plan that out. That was 3 years to the point that we made the decision in July of 2015 when the City Council approved the cooperative agreement. That process started in 2012 and ended in July of 2015. And then it was fully a year that we took to actually disengage and separate the Arvada Center operation from the city operation. So if you look at what was, how long that took, it was about a 4-year separation from being a city department to being a standalone nonprofit organization. We did that because we felt it would minimize the impacts on the center's operation as well as on the staff. And I would suggest that something along those lines needs to be considered here as well. The Arvada Center board and staff contend that they need operational control over all facilities within the Arvada Center. Again, going back to the effort that was expended to negotiate the operating agreement, that was one of the things that was mentioned consistently over that period of time, and frankly is I think captured at least somewhat in the operating agreement in terms of how facilities are to be scheduled and how they're to be planned over the course of a year, and the communication between myself and the executive director. And then lastly, we agreed that we need to identify mutually beneficial impacts of continued Arvada events operation at the center, both from a financial and attendance standpoint. A financial standpoint, is it possible to look at transferring some of the revenue from the Arvada events to the Arvada Center? And then secondly, attendance. Is it possible to capture at least some of the attendance at the events held there so that it can be factored into the Scientific and Cultural Facilities District analysis of annual attendance at the Arvada Center? We don't know that. We'd have to look at that. So through this, we came to a recommendation, which is what we felt we needed to present to you tonight. Now, I would say that this is an informal recommendation pending the discussion and input feedback that we received from you tonight. But we felt we had enough information to at least offer a recommendation. And that would be to develop a plan to continue operation of Arvada events within the Arvada Center in a mutually beneficial manner. Potential elements of the plan: a portion of Arvada events revenue transferred to the Arvada Center for the Arts and Humanities programs, create a master schedule of events approved in advance by the city manager and the executive director, develop a business case for relocation of Arvada events and reuse of facilities by the Arts and Humanities. So in both cases, we have to acknowledge that the cooperative agreement envisioned Arvada events being relocated from the Arvada Center. That's, as far as I'm concerned, that's a council policy. What we have to do is figure out how to operationalize that. What does that mean? Is it time bound, which I think it should be, and how much time should it be for the relocation to occur? And then on the other side, on the arts and humanities side, what I heard the council talk about during the joint meeting is we need a business case. We need some understanding as to what would be placed into the vacated space for our Arvada events. How much would that cost, and what kind of timeline would be involved in that? And then I would envision that plan to be developed by staff and ultimately approved by the board and council. Now, in the course of discussing this with Philip, Philip talked to Arvada Center board members, and Arvada Center board members made it clear to Philip that they would like to be directly involved in the development of that plan, which is fine by me. I'm happy to involve anyone who would like to be involved. I wanted to bring that point up tonight in case city council members felt that they also wanted to be involved in the development of that plan. I mean, we're welcome to have council join us as well. I mean, really, when you look back at how we negotiated the cooperative agreement, it was 2 council members and 2 members of the task force who later became board members that actually helped put that together. We met over a period of probably 6 months, if I remember correctly. So, we're happy to have the direct engagement of both council and board with that. Bottom line is that whatever plan we would come up with, we would have to take it as one plan to the board and take it as one plan to the city council. So that concludes the presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that council members may have.
Ms. Ford.
One of the things that I noticed in reading on the information sheet, under the next steps, it talked about either continued operation of Arvada events at the Arvada Center or develop a plan to terminate the program at a future date. What I felt might be lacking is it doesn't mention anything about a possible partnership, which was mentioned the night of our meeting. And I think that would be really important to include, because I think that it would be disastrous, perhaps, maybe that's a too hard of a word, but if we assume that we cannot afford the land and a possible relocation of Arvada events. So I think that should be somewhere in this discussion.
Yes, Councilmember Ford, I think what we've illustrated on our presentation tonight really tries to amend what was written in the cover sheet, which is that we develop a plan that is mutually beneficial to both parties. And I guess I would offer as kind of the inspiration of that thought was something that was brought up during the joint meeting. I think probably best expressed by Ken Fellman, who said, there should be a way to look at this in a manner that, at least in the short term, can be mutually beneficial. So that's really what I would propose tonight, is that we all put our heads together and figure out how we can do this so that it is mutually beneficial.
But Ms. Ford, were you talking more about a private partner in terms of a facility?
I was.
Yeah,
so
that's
the possibility
Yeah.
of having a private partner. And there are people that I have talked to who might be interested in something like that. So I think it might behoove us to kind of look at some private parties as well and consider that as an option.
Okay.
And I think part of that discussion, I think we ought to talk to our friends in Westminster in terms of the Westin up there and the facility they've got in terms of what's worked, what hasn't worked. And I don't know what the bottom line is now in terms of how much of that is city subsidized versus and obviously that's a much bigger hotel than what we're looking at. But I think that's part of the discussion. My understanding is staff's having some ongoing discussions with a possible second hotel in Arvada that might be interested in coming in to, and there might be an opportunity to have some discussions there in terms of a more robust facility that would be suitable for Arvada events.
Yeah.
I think that would be important too, because as I was, from what I'm understanding, the main reason that we have Arvada events is that we didn't have a large enough facility. So we know that we need that large enough facility. But at the same time, one of the things that I was contemplating reading this document was, in terms of a new model for Arvada events. We've been pretty much going along. By bringing in a private party, for example, they may be able to have a model that would be very, very successful. And not that we're not successful as Arvada events, but I mean a business that truly is growing and continues to grow and maybe expands into other avenues as well. So, I would really love to see the city personally get out of Arvada events, but I also understand the necessity of having it because we do need that event center for that many people. But I think that, with a private person, it could change it in a very positive way.
Okay. Ms. Miller?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Devon. You may have answered these questions at a previous meeting, but I was at the last Arvada Center update, so I did see some of that, and I had some questions then, as I do now. So on the November 1st meeting, I noticed that nobody from Arvada Events is present in these conversations. Is that true from the list, or is...
Well, certainly Gordon Rusick was present at the November 1st.
I didn't see him on the list,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm an association management company, and I manage trade shows and events and conferences. It's what I do. And so I've held several at the Arvada Center, at Arvada events, and I just want to make sure that we do stress, like Ms. Ford did, that it is needed in Arvada. In the transition plan, I had a couple of things that you mentioned, and I wasn't sure how this could work. Is the city manager and executive director going to create a schedule of events? And I'm just not sure what that looks like if the Arvada Events is trying to book conferences out in 2019. Is that something they run by you first and then they book it, or?
Well, I think frankly, I'm not sure that I can give you all the details on what that would look like, but what I would envision it looking like is that there would be a master schedule of that both parties would bring to the table, and then we'd work together to minimize the conflicts as much as possible. There are certain events that occur on the Arvada event side that are annual and large and probably need some consideration. On the other hand, there's similar events that occur on the arts and humanities side that also would need some consideration. So we would develop a master schedule in a manner that minimizes impacts, maximizes use, and is mutually beneficial to both parties. Exactly what that looks like, I can't tell you, but the agreement actually references that and references the city manager and the executive director as being the final approvals of whatever master schedule is developed. And that's something that we haven't really performed yet in the agreement, and I think that's part of what we have to do to figure out how to operate this in a mutually beneficial manner.
Perfect. And then I just had one other question, and pretty much it was with the whether or not we transfer money back and forth from events to the Arvada Center, and really timelines and things like that. Do you have any opinion on timelines yet, or is that something that you haven't thought of yet?
Well, I think a transfer would probably be projected on an annual basis. In terms of exactly whether we break it down to quarterly or something like that, I can't tell you I would know that yet, but it's certainly something that we should look at.
But you're looking for 2018. I'm sorry, I was just wondering if this was something you were looking at for 2018 or future.
Probably more future, since we've already approved the 2018 budget. That would be my thought. But again, I think until we get into the details, I would have to, qualify that response.
Perfect. That's all I have.
Great. My thoughts, and I've been, I think, pretty clear on this. I'm totally uncomfortable just shutting down Arvada events at the Arvada Center until we've got another place for it to go, or have some sense of that timing, or if we decide we want to get out of that business entirely. But, for us old timers, that facility was built and expanded because Arvada did not have, and frankly, other than the Arvada Center, doesn't have a suitable spot for that large of an event, for larger events. And it's part of the community, and it's part of we have so many different types of events there. We have city events there. We have Chamber of Commerce. We had Dot Miller's wedding. We had my daughter's wedding. I mean, it's a great facility for a huge number of things. And the staff does a great job of putting those events together. So, I don't think we kick it to the curb. We need to see how we work in better partnership with the center to meet their needs right now in terms of it moving forward, and explore if there is a way to go off-site with a larger facility down the road, and what that timing and what that might look like with either a public-private partnership or some other arrangement that might come together. I think the other thing we need to be looking at real closely right now is what happens with Westwoods with that clubhouse, and does it start feeling the need for some of these kind of functions for the smaller, because what's the seating going to be, Gordon? It's at Westwoods.
Well, we haven't expanded banquet seating at all. It'll still be with what we always call the private room. The rest of the restaurant is really to serve the needs of a 27-year-old golfer. But the goal is to program the programmable space as much as possible.
Okay, so I think it'll fit some needs out there. So I think we gotta wait and see how that plays into it as well. So, does anybody have any problem with the recommendations or the procedures that we're looking at following moving forward for the next phase?
I think the recommendations are very good and line out a reasonable procedure by which we move forward. So yeah, I don't have any problem with that at all. I think it's the right path to go down.
Good. Mr. McGough?
Yes, I agree with that. I agree that we've got to work toward the Arvada Center Board having full control over all the space in the center, and that we need this transition plan to carry us forward. So I fully accept the staff recommendation. I have no problem with it at all.
Okay. Mr. Pfeiffer?
I too will agree with staff, and I had to do a Nallard move there, pushed off the microphone while talking. I agree with it. We just, it's one step at a time. This is not a quick and done. It's a longer journey, and I'm trying to think how long we've been engaged on this, longer than I could think. So definitely move forward and cautiously, go through those steps, and we'll have a good outcome, I'm sure, at the end.
Good. Yeah, there's no question that we want the Arvada Center under the nonprofit to succeed and do well. We're thrilled. Philip was given a projection that this run of Joseph might be our first $1 million revenue show in the Arvada Center history, so, which is pretty doggone exciting. And we're all so proud of the center and all aspects of it, and we want all aspects to succeed. So that's the kind of partnership that we're looking to move forward.
Okay.
Okay.
Got my marching orders. One of the things on the to-do list will be to contact the contact that Councilmember Ford provided. We'll get on that and schedule a meeting, and we'll keep the council up to date.
And talk to the Westminster folks too.
Yeah,
in terms
we will.
of the.
We'll talk to Westminster staff, and we'll keep council up to date. And then I'll work with Philip on the formation of the group to develop this plan. I'm sure it will include board members, given the input I have from Philip. If council members want to join at some point in time, that would be fine as well.
Very good.
Okay, thank you.
A quick stand in place before we get Mr. Daly's 4-hour presentation. You bet.
Good evening, Mayor.
Mr. Daly.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity tonight to join with my colleagues, Deputy City Manager Bill Ray and Finance Director Brian Archer in making this presentation on special metropolitan districts for the council. It's primarily an educational presentation. I'm sure if council has questions, you can just go ahead and stop us anywhere along the way and we'll see if we can respond to them. So if we think about the levels of government within the state of Colorado, you start at the state level, of course, and you have counties and you have municipalities. You have two categories of municipalities. You have statutory municipalities, whose powers come directly from the statutes, and whatever the legislature passes, that's the power that the statutory municipality has. For the city of Arvada and other cities along the Front Range, we are a home rule municipality. We have a separate charter that governs the organization of the city. And in addition to certain statutes, the city council is authorized to adopt ordinances. In addition to the municipal level of government, there's also the special districts. And the special districts that we're probably most familiar with include the Apex Recreational District and the Arvada Fire Protection District. And the services that they provide, it's a separate governmental entity, and they have a separate mill levy, as does the city of Arvada, the 4.31 mills. For metropolitan districts, or what I'll call special districts, and most, especially tonight during the presentation, we'll just simply refer to as districts. These are statutorily created political quasi-municipal entities within the state of Colorado. So they are recognized as separate governments. And when we think about a metropolitan or a special district, the question may come, well, why are there two names? Why is it a special district and a metropolitan district? It's actually created by statute, and it's the Special District Act. But within the definitional section of the Special District Act, there is a special definition for metropolitan districts. So if one thinks of the Apex District or the Arvada Fire Protection District, they really provide one service, right? For metropolitan districts, the districts that we're going to be talking about tonight, there's two or more services that they provide. So when we think about well, why would there be a separate governmental entity that would govern within the city of Arvada, the answer is simple. Because the state legislature said you can do this. And the way they are formed is simple. A petition is generally filed with the city. And the petition generally, when we're talking about metropolitan districts, it comes from, generally speaking, a developer that is going to develop a residential area. And what they do, and this was created not only statutorily, but in 2007, the city council, the then city council, passed Chapter 91 of the Arvada City Code, which talked about the processes that one must go through to organize a special district or metropolitan district within the boundaries of the city of Arvada. And so the process is as follows. What happens is a pre-submittal meeting occurs, and basically it occurs with a number of different departments within the city. So you'll have the city manager's office, the city attorney's office, the finance department, community development, perhaps public works sits there. And what happens is the developer comes in and says, we have a proposed service plan. The service plan is essentially a document that outlines this is what the metropolitan district is going to do. This is how it's going to raise money. These are the construction projects that it's going to do, and this is how long the construction project will take, and this is how long it's going to take to pay off the bonds to do these construction projects. Developers typically use these in solely residential areas to essentially get reimbursed or paid back for the costs of the construction that they do when they are building residential areas. So if one thinks of a residential area and you think of roads and sidewalks and utility lines, that sort of thing, generally speaking, the developer has to upfront those costs. And what the developer is asking the city to do is to create a metropolitan district through the passage of a resolution that will essentially authorize the creation or the organization of that metropolitan district within the boundaries of the city. And then the next step is, if the council approves that proposed service plan, then the developer, in this case the petitioner, files something with the district court in the county where the geographical boundaries of the residential district are located, and the court has a separate hearing for the organization of the metropolitan district. And in that process, basically, whether it's the city council or the district court, essentially what happens is the city council will look city council will get a report from the staff that will essentially brief the council on, this is what the district is proposing to do, this is what the finances are, this is how long it's going to be, this is what the mill levy is going to be. And that report is given to the council. There's a notice of a public hearing. Council has a public hearing, and anybody who wants to come and speak to the issue of the organization or the creation of that metropolitan district may do so at that public hearing. Council then has the ability to either approve the resolution. You can conditionally approve the resolution and say, we want more information on this aspect or that aspect of the service plan, so we're going to conditionally approve it, but it will not be deemed approved until you actually bring that information back. And certainly the city council has the authority to disapprove the metropolitan district. And generally, council is given 30 days from the date that the public hearing is held to make those findings. Those findings are generally contained within the resolution that the council ultimately passes, either approving or disapproving the metropolitan district. So if one considers, let me go down one slide here. If one considers what can happen throughout this process, the question may be asked, well, so we approve this metropolitan district. How do we know that the district is doing what they're supposed to be doing down the road? Let's say a year later, 2 years later, 5 years later. The district is required under our ordinance, Chapter 91 of the City Code, to provide us with an annual report by August 1st. So if it's created in 2017, by August 1st of 2018, an annual report is filed. And what the report includes, and this is coming from the Metropolitan District, what's included is an audit of the numbers of how much money's actually been spent and how much money is coming into the district from the mill levy, copies of all construction or service contracts, a summary of the operations during that particular year, and a summary of the financial condition of the district as of the time of the annual report. And so typically those annual reports are funneled to the city manager, who then funnels them to the various affected departments, and they end up, generally speaking, with the city clerk's office, and that's where all the documents are filed. Council from time to time will recall that even in the last year, there's been a couple of instances where districts have come and asked for modifications. You'll recall one district that wanted to shrink the number of sub-districts it had because it found that it didn't need all those districts, and council had to pass that and had to understand what that was all about. Later in this presentation, Brian Archer is going to give you a presentation really showing you all the districts that we have within the city of Arvada, so that you can get a sense of just how many there are. Bill Ray is going to discuss a policy issue with you pertaining to some provisions within the ordinance that talk about what are the criteria that council utilizes in making a decision whether to allow a metropolitan district in a solely residential area. And I'm going to defer those issues to those individuals when they make the presentation to you. The last thing I want to say to you is there are costs involved in this process of reviewing these proposed service plans, and the cost that's outlined in the ordinance is if I'm a developer / petitioner and I want to get a special district organized, say in a solely residential area, I have to pay $2,500 as an application fee. It's non-refundable. And that money basically goes to defray the expenses of city staff's time in reviewing the proposal, the proposed service plan, and any other information that the developer wishes. If council has any questions on anything that I've currently presented, you all seem amazed. So I don't know if you're just totally bored or what that is. But
We're looking forward to Mr. Archer's and Mr.
Are you
Ray's
looking for theirs?
presentation.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your patience.
Good presentation.
It's tough to follow that. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Thank you, Mr. Daly, for your opening remarks on this. I would just reiterate a couple of things that Chris had said, in that special districts traditionally used to be single-purpose districts. In other words, they would simply provide a municipal service without having to be a municipality. But certainly in the 1980s, that really changed dramatically as metropolitan districts now offered a vehicle to offer basic government financing in pursuit of development for infrastructure primarily. And so council in 2007, in considering the growing number of requests, sat down and made a couple of basic policy decisions about your criteria, if you will, for approval. As Chris had said, the statute allows for councils to approve or disapprove, but doesn't offer any further guidance as to why you might want to or might not want to. So in 2007, the city council, through the enactment of the ordinance, made some very clear policy decisions. And so I just wanted to review those with you for a moment. Chris had talked, primarily in terms of residential development in metropolitan districts, because that's traditionally what we have seen. But to be clear, metropolitan districts can be created for any purpose at all. It can be residential, it can be industrial, it can be commercial, it can be some combination of those. And what the council did, and what I think wisely, is they looked at the ability for the creation of special districts. And so for the access that kind of financing would offer in pursuit of your strategic goals, primarily in the arena of economic development. And so the ordinance sets out a pretty clear criteria that basically says is that if a developer looking for a tax-producing, jobs-producing type of development, the bias of the council, not a guarantee, but the bias of the council would be for approval. In other words, to encourage that vehicle, which really is an amazing grant of power for another governmental entity, another taxing entity, to be created for a purpose. And the purpose that the council agreed on is that that purpose should be geared, number one, towards economic development. You gave a second consideration where some, but not all, is non-residential, in which you stated that your bias, again, would be for disapproval. And then not saying that you would never consider that, and in the ordinance there was a clear exception, is that when the developer, as part of the package, would pledge funds for significant regional infrastructure that would benefit citizens beyond the boundaries of the district and beyond the boundaries of the development, that would be a basis for consideration of getting to yes. Thirdly, and the one that we have dealt with as a city most often, is that are metro districts that are being requested for purely residential purposes. Again, the council's policy bias is reflected in the ordinance is for disapproval. And as you can see in your package and on your screens, you gave yourselves actually 4 different exceptions for that. Again, rather than providing funds for, in the case of residential, is that the developer would actually cause to be constructed regionally significant infrastructure that merits and meets one of your strategic results. Or that it's located within a half a mile residential development within a designated transit stop. Or that it's located within a designated redevelopment, primary urban renewal district. Or that it was fostering Colorado Green Build programs. So those are the exceptions that you provided for yourselves as a policy consideration when being requested to create a separate metropolitan district.
Mr. Marriott's got a question.
Please.
Quick question, Mr. Ray. Do you know those policy decisions that the Arvada City Council made previously, how those align with policy decisions other councils or governing bodies in the region might have made?
That's a great question, Councilmember Marriott. And I would say that literally there are all kinds of examples. There are municipalities and counties where it's pretty much there for the asking. There are those that say we would never consider them under any circumstances. Okay. And there, as we'll see in a minute, there are reasons why various governments fall in and out of that. I can't say that there's a real trend one way or the other. I would say that Arvada is ahead of the game, is that you have a clearly articulated policy as to why you do that, literally than somebody showing up on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. So, so in considering all that, and one of the reasons we wanted to bring this forward is just simply to confirm or to bring up the conversation if the council wishes to re-examine or review any of those policies. There are reasons why there are counties and municipalities support that, because they believe that lower financing costs for infrastructure encourages development and, at least in some sense, would lower the cost to the ultimate end user. That if you are a residential development, at least, well, I haven't adopted a tax act yet, so you can still write off your property taxes, at least this week. And that increasingly, some metro districts have approached the city with the idea that in lieu of creating a homeowners association, which is, after all, a voluntary type of organization, if you will, in terms of compliance, is that because metropolitan districts are a form of government, is that they may be able to assume some of those functions but have more teeth in the process of doing that. That said, there are also reasons why many municipalities and counties do not look at this advantageously. Probably the one that I think most spurred the conversation from my recollection in 2007 was this first item, that when you create metropolitan districts, you create tax islands, if you will, where the same city services, that street maintenance or street plowing or sidewalks that are constructed may be in two developments side by side that would not be materially different to the naked eye, yet this neighborhood is paying sometimes 50% more in property taxes than the adjoining neighborhood. And so it's very difficult to really explain rationally for a lot of people that says, why is my property tax 160 mils, yet my neighbor across the street here is less than 100? And so that's one of the issues. Because of that, and this is merely my reading into that, but I think there is some validity to it, that it can create resistance from citizens for future citywide tax issues that may be put in front of the voters from time to time. It's like, I'm already paying more than mine. Everybody else should pay for theirs. And it can lead, and I have seen it lead, to citizen confusion if they're having some issue that really rests with the metropolitan district, which are sometimes hard to track down who those board of directors are or how you can get a hold of them from the government that they know they can find, that being the city. So those are some things that you may want to consider, is that, are these policy directions that you have enacted in the ordinance still good and valid ones? And does that term, which is deliciously undefined, of regionally significant infrastructure, require additional context or definition? Because there is no other definition than what is actually in the ordinance.
Right.
And the council has from time to time interpreted that to mean different things.
Mr. McGough's got a question.
Please.
With the approval of a metro district, do we put our citizens at any risk? I'm talking about significant risk if for example, if the plan is to build 1,000 homes and the developer is, through its metropolitan district, is installing all that infrastructure for 1,000 homes, but now there's a sudden downturn in development, and there's only 100 homes built. Can those 100 citizens, 100 residential units be responsible for more than their proportionate share of the originally intended 1,000 residences?
I believe the short answer is yes. They are responsible.
So there is a significant risk if there should be a downturn.
This
And
was the
there's already been
experience-
approved the development of a large metropolitan district.
This was the experience of Douglas County and the area around Castle Rock in the 1980s, where there were a number of metropolitan districts that were created and get caught in the downdraft of the savings and loan downturn. So it certainly, that has happened. I'm not aware of any special districts that have actually declared bankruptcy, but they have had to go through some workouts. That's for sure.
But it is something that we probably should keep in mind as another policy consideration.
Absolutely.
And that is the potential risk.
You bet. So I will turn this over to Brian Archer, but I found it fascinating to recognize that in the state of Colorado, there is one state government, 64 counties, 272 municipalities, and over 2,000 special districts as of last month. I'm sure the number's higher now. So with that, I invite my colleague, Brian Archer.
Thank you, Mr. A, Mr. Daly. So now we get to do the fun part, numbers, right? That's
Love
why
it,
I'm here,
yes.
numbers, yes, okay. So there's currently 12 metropolitan districts that City Council has approved that are active in the city of Arvada. And this map is a representation of each one of them. I do apologize, it's quite small. Hopefully you'll be able to pull up your screen and view them. What you will notice is they are predominantly in the northwest part of the city. Certainly that is the part of the city that is the last to develop. And they do range anywhere from ones that are residential only to ones that are multi-use to ones that are commercial only. And you can't quite see the little numbers on there, but they range anywhere from 10 mills to a high of 80 mills. To put that into perspective, currently the city of Arvada has, from each one of its homeowners, 4.31 mills. On average, a home that is not in a metropolitan district pays 95 mills. And so you can see an additional 10 to 80 mills, as Mr. Ray said earlier, can add quite an increase to your property tax bill. For perspective, the highest mill rate charged for any other entity in Arvada would be for the school district, and they charge 45.9 mills. We have a quick slide on each one of these, and I will not spend a lot of time on any one of them specifically. I do want to point out, let me go back, I'm sorry, that the smallest amount collected is by Canyon Pines at $252 a year. That is because there is nothing going on in Canyon Pines today. To a high being collected by Leiden Rock of approximately $1.8 million. That number will continue to adjust as the development continues to grow. They are inflation protected, meaning if the property values go down and they need additional mills to make their limit, they can raise their mills. And the converse can also happen. If property values go up drastically and they need a reduced mill, they are allowed to reduce their mills.
Mr. Pfeiffer, do you have a question?
Yeah, I did.
I saw you wanting to say something.
Because I've gotten a few phone calls on this recently, which is
Okay.
interesting. I don't know why, but I'm getting some calls around the extra tax. What's the checks and balance with that variable mill going up and down? How do we, because it's based on actual, I'm assuming actual costs,
Assessed valuation, yes.
evaluation of the infrastructure.
No, of the homes that are in the district.
Yeah. But wasn't the money, the mills, to cover repaying the developer for curb, gutter, sewer line, water lines, all the things they had to do for the development, right?
Or they pay it directly, depending on how it was set up. In some cases, the district themselves borrow the money.
Borrow the money, and then this is the way to repay it back.
Correct.
So, like, one that pops out that is like a sore thumb to me is the Richards Farms. I believe that's Sims and 80th, is that not? No?
Richards Farms is 72nd, right across from the Apex Center.
Okay, okay, all right, okay. And that's 60 mills, right?
And that will continue to go down because this is as of the 2016 assessment, and there wasn't a lot of homes in that area. As the homes continue to come in, that mill will go down to meet the debt level.
And what criteria do we use? Because that's, how many homes is that? I'm just picking on that one for right now.
Well, we can flip to
Oh,
Richard
sorry.
Farms.
All right, you can go through. You know what? I'll save my questions so you go through the presentation. Because I'm sure you answered them in there.
So we have a slide on each one of the districts and showing the various levels. Cimarron being one of the larger districts, currently 55, actually it was 50 mills in 16, it will go to 55 for 17. This is the Candelas region, if you want to look at it that way. They also charge a mill for operations. This is one of the unique districts. This is not charging an HOA, basically, as they do it through charging a mill. And that helps to pay for their rec center, their parks, landscaping, et cetera.
So when you say usage, water, sewer, parks, it's to pay for the what with the water? Because I'm sure they get a water bill from us, right?
They do,
So
but
what's
in this
water?
case, the mills that are being charged act as like an HOA would be, and the HOA pays for the water.
For common space?
For common space.
Okay,
Yep.
okay, that's what that's for.
Sorry, I
All right.
apologize
Yeah,
for that.
I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
GEOS, we won't spend much time on it. It's a active metro district, but nothing is going on from a building perspective. Hometown number 2 is just getting started. Even though it's been in existence since 2008, they are working on putting those townhomes in, and as they put them in, they will increase the mill to pay for the various bond issue. Kipling Ridge, from one of our urban renewal districts, commercial only, will pay off in 2029. Leiden Ranch, another one of the larger districts in the northwest area, charges both for debt and for operations, and charges an HOA fee. You will notice that that debt payment is scheduled to pay off in 2052. Councilmember Pfeiffer, one of the questions I did not answer that you asked, what are the checks and balances? When the district is completely built out, the way that they roll out is various homeowners take over the board, and so that usually the board is made up by the developer, maybe some of the builders, but as they complete the projects, then it's taken over by the homeowners themselves. Correct, for the district. Leiden Rock.
Sorry. Bill, you were talking about the districts having more meat. What were you referring to when you said that? Because if the homeowners take over, then at that point, then in terms of the...
What I was referencing was simply that, as you know, in many matters of an HOA, the only remedy the HOA has for a violation is a civil suit. Okay? And because metropolitan districts are governmental units, they ultimately, in certain cases, would have the power to lien the property without the need for civil suit. Because they have the patina, they have the authority as a unit of government to undertake such measures if that's within their service plan, if it is a violation.
HOAs can do
Yeah,
that too.
HOAs
Okay.
can do that too.
Sorry. I think they don't have to go through the civil proceeding, though, to do that. I think it's just a finding of the board. So,
Thank you.
Mountain Shadows also charges mills for debt and for operations, commonly known as Whisper Creek. Richard Farms, the one that Councilmember Pfeiffer just brought up, 125 homes to be built in that district. Currently 40 mills for debt, 20 mills for operations, and a $360 per unit fee.
Okay, let's dive in a little bit more on this because, so you have 40 mills for debt. It's going to take them to 2045 to pay off that debt.
As
And the
is
debt
scheduled
is,
today.
is accrued, the debt that they've used is curb, gutter, street, sewer, those kind of things.
Correct.
And it was so expensive to do the 3 or 4 blocks, that's going to take them 20 plus years to pay it off.
In this case, 30 years.
Yeah, that's a little scary for a couple blocks of that. And then 20 mils for operation, which is maintenance, landscaping, operations debt, which I'm not too sure why that is there under mills of 20 mils plus $360 per unit annually for, I guess, trash, maybe?
Trash.
Or usually
again,
HOA
common
pays for
areas.
maintenance. So like I live in an HOA.
Yes,
My HOA fees pays for maintenance, landscaping, and trash
correct.
and recycling.
And I don't know specifics on Richards Farms, but
But in general, I'm just using
general,
this one as
yes,
an example.
absolutely.
So they're breaking up line items, and it's revenue sources contributing to certain expenses.
Correct. So each one of the requirements for the district is that they prepare a budget and an annual report, and it will show everything that it goes to. You also pay for collections. So you usually hire a third
debt,
party
yeah.
to do that. Debt, legal fees, accounting fees, and audit, an annual audit.
And these are all disclosed to the residents.
They are, absolutely. And some of these you will notice that there's links. Many of the links are open to the public. Some are private because they're for the residents only. But it's also then turned over to the state of Colorado and on and on and on.
And so, sorry, I have a.
It's okay.
This is the learning process still, even though I've been here a little while, but this is getting more into the nuts and bolts. I guess where I'm just, so if, well, I'm trying to struggle here. How many, I don't remember the Richard Farms one that well. I remember us doing the hearing, I just don't remember making the Metro District, so I don't remember the plan as much. But using them as an example, I guess I'm trying to still understand the benefits of having that Metro District and have them do debts. I know you pointed some out. It's still tax write-off, and it's still, it kind of recoups on some stuff. But traditionally, before Metro Districts, how was that done? Was that
It was
just
built
embed
into the price of the house,
Okay.
right? And
Yeah,
so
the price
that's
of the
that's
home.
what's going on here is that they're able to hold the house price down some,
And then put it on their taxes.
put it on their taxes, so it's spread out.
And I think
over-
that's I'm getting the calls is they're seeing their taxes happen and they're like, wait, hold on, wait, Bob, you pay $2,900 for your house. I'm paying $6,000, $8,000, $7,000 for mine. I have the same police protection. I think you kind of already hit it, and I think
Yes.
that's where we're struggling on. Well, you pave my roads, you snowplow my roads. It's your guys that are usually doing the main roads. So why do I have to pay triple, double the taxes than you?
Well, and if you go back many years, and Mr. Daly will remember this, and others, back in the Lake Shore, wasn't it Lake Shore that was one of the first ones that, and the notice provisions were woefully inadequate back in that time frame. And so now, every real estate contract has this bold, large print. You may be part of a metropolitan district, please check and.
Your notices, yeah.
Yeah, because back in the day, that was a huge hit.
Well, and I
for
think that's what
that
they call,
area
some of the
up
people
there.
that were calling were new people moving in.
Right.
So I think they are getting their notices, but some are like, hey, wait, I don't remember signing this.
It's pay me now or pay me later.
All right, okay. I might have more questions though.
Sure. Spring Mesa at one time, which was known as El Dorado Hills, currently 30 mills for debt and a $204 per year annual fee, fully built out. Debt is scheduled to be paid off in 2034. West Point, Village at 5 Parks, one of our initial communities that went out west, also fully built out, 32 mills for debt, and a $900 to $2,076 per year. That depends on whether or not you live in a common area and what size your home is, et cetera, et cetera. That one is scheduled to pay off in 2029. That one does include snow removal. Westtown Metropolitan District, hometown number 1. 80 mills and an HOA fee of $26.76 annually. Again, scheduled to pay off in 2048. Some pretty large operational fee there. Predominantly a multifamily development
With mixed use, which I'm waiting to see that happen.
with future mixed use.
No, Westtown. No, Westtown is. Oh, it has to on the end. Trust me, I'm waiting for those doors to open, which I'm not seeing happen. But I do remember a question that I had. So when they do for debt, they validate the debt in the mill. So there is some checks and balance that I pulled out. I'm just using rounded numbers, $100 million to do infrastructure build, and that there is not any profits being made off of that mill. So I
That's
guess
correct.
is really the question I'm asking.
Yeah, I mean, the only possibility would be a payback of the developer. Maybe the developer has fronted some of that
So
money.
some interest maybe, or some.
It's pretty
a
rare,
cost of
and that's
cash.
very, very structured in that case, but it's certainly a possibility, yes.
It's a possibility that they could make some money off of the
That
mills?
no,
or
they would get paid back, and there's a possibility that there would be
there's
an
some
interest.
interest
Yes.
charges there.
Yes.
But that would be the only case.
Yes.
In which, but it should be, I spent this much and I'm repaying this much.
Yes.
Okay.
So that completes the quick run through of the 11. I did not show Canyon Pines because there's nothing going on in Canyon Pines. So if there's any questions for the three of us?
Well, I think the issue we need to address is, are we comfortable with the policy that we have right now, which frankly, you say have a bias against, I would say a presumption against, a rebuttable presumption. And do we need better clarification on the definition of what's the off-site benefits? And so I guess I would like some staff input on what are some of those kinds of off-site things that would justify.
Well, the council has looked at many. I think probably the first case that I recall, which was Leiden Rock, is probably the best example, where the city was looking at an annexation request for a development that was purely residential in actually an area that was not scheduled in our comprehensive plan for growth beyond the bare minimum. But what the developer brought to the table was, number one, the entirety of the Jefferson Parkway right-of-way, which I think we would all consider to be regionally significant. And as importantly, although literally it cannot be seen, was a water main interconnect that connected the west half of our system south of Leiden Rock to Candelas, which provided us with a loop that would have cost the city otherwise hundreds of thousands of dollars to have done, and the developer, as part of that, offered to make that interconnection. So those are things that are clearly significantly of regional impact. And I think probably for me in rereading this, it was to be clear, because we've had several developers approach, particularly on drainage proposals, that there are people outside that will benefit because water will drain to this detention pond. But I think the wording of the ordinance is such that it really must be shown is that the development itself, the regionally significant infrastructure, goes beyond the bounds. And that's why I think these things are great, just to remind ourselves of some of the nuances. Just the difference between a mixed-use development is that the developer would provide funds, whereas in something that's a purely win is that they would actually cause to be constructed.
Okay. Mr. Pfeiffer?
So let's go over another use case, since we're talking about, was it Richmond Farms? The one
Mhm.
from Apex?
Richards Farm.
Richards Farms.
Mhm.
Remind me, what criteria made that regionally important to us?
I believe that the determination of the council was that they would make a contribution towards the intersection improvements that would take place at 72nd and Indiana.
But wouldn't that be normal with any development that we ask them to improve the road? They don't need to be a metro district to do that.
They don't have to be. There was some physical separation. It's not like they are proximate to it. But at the end of it all, I don't know, and I'd let Mr. Daly talk about kind of the nexus of proportional impact as to whether, I think from a purely quantitative point of view, we might have had difficulty in quantifying you own 37.2% or 18.8% of the impacts that's going to happen on this. And so council made that policy determination that putting money towards, again, is something that they considered, the council considered to be sufficient to meet that regional infrastructure. As you can see, there's a wide disparity between the two, which causes us as staff to come back and ask if we can get further guidance as a policy matter about what the council's intention is.
Yeah, I agree with the mayor. I think we need more data to really understand, and maybe we as a council need to come up with some closer guardrails on it, because for me, I'm looking at that development, and I don't justify an extra tax of 80 mils on that small community for, you know, very little benefit, and having that huge tax on them for 30 plus years. So I want to make sure we are very thoughtful through our process and educated on the ask, and clearly understand those impacts to those residents when they move in.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mr. McGough?
Yes, I have a couple questions. One is, when the staff brings a recommendation to the council concerning the creation of a metro district, has the staff looked at the numbers, or is that done by some other jurisdiction? Do we look at the numbers to see the infrastructure appears to, this is a realistic estimate, the mill levy is appropriate, et cetera? Do we give a go, no go at that point by staff?
Well, let me answer that question in two ways, and I'm going to let Brian talk to the efficacy of what is being financed. The city, as a practical matter, does not really look over the shoulder of the developer and say, you're paying $2.72 a yard for concrete, it ought to be $1.25. That's really, we will look at things of that in the course of infrastructure that's being turned over to the city, as we would with any new development, to ensure that the construction methods, the construction techniques meet our standards. And I'll let Brian talk to the kind of how they judge that in terms of financing that, because that's really a market consideration.
Oh, you're Brian. Oh, yeah, I'm Brian for right now. So just so that we're clear, when we have those pre-submittal meetings on those proposed special district service plans, we have someone from Public Works that's sitting there that's asking questions of the developer, the petitioner, and that developer's team of experts. So what is it you're doing here? And they give a general look. I think Bill's right. I don't think we look at those costs specifically and say, hey, I think that's too much money there. I think they're looking in more generalities about what that is. Certainly Brian's going to respond to the issue of the financing, but I want to put this in perspective for the council, because this is a financing tool. You need to understand this is a financing tool, and developers throughout the state and throughout the country, different states have different statutes, certainly, but they look at this as an instrument to assist in the financing. So we may have a petitioner, a developer group come to us and say, we want to do this solely residential development at this particular location. Without the use of this financing tool, we will not be able to construct homes here. They simply tell us that that's what it is. And so I think the guidance council can ultimately give, and you know, maybe the proposal that should come out of this discussion tonight, if council's willing to do that, is maybe staff should provide council with some language that we would suggest in terms of amending the ordinance, and see if that, you know, more accurately depicts what this council sees, as opposed to what the council was looking at in 2007, given the experiences that we have. But what I want to just emphasize is, you know, as a financing tool, these developers, you know, they're trying to develop communities that are attractive, communities that will, you know, attract residences to the city of Arvada and the quality of life that we have. And this is just another tool that is utilized by them in getting it done. And I also want to state, it's the notice on this, and I know that the mayor spoke to this a little bit, the notice is very precise that is given to these homeowners. They walk in and they look at this house, and they're overcome by the beauty of the house and the area and the view of the mountains and everything. But you know, they are told, it is disclosed to them, this is a metro district, and these are the number of mills that you're going to pay, and this is what it is that you're going to do. So this isn't exactly a surprise to anyone. And when you close on that home, there are documents that you're signing that indicate, yes, I have noticed that this is a metropolitan district and that these are the mills right now, and those mills are subject to change in the future. So this is, while it may come as a surprise to some people who have not been in these particular developments, it's certainly no surprise to the residents of those developments when they purchase their home then.
My other question is, since this ordinance, Chapter 91, enacted in 2007, has the council declined to approve, or just put it the other way, have they disapproved the request to create any
I do
metro
not recall,
districts?
that's a great question, Councilmember
Or do
McGough.
you-
I don't recall a situation where council has declined. I do know of situations where staff has told a developer.
So they've had to perfect
There's
them
no
in some
way
way.
we're recommending this
Yeah.
to the council.
So basically, they will perfect whatever goes into the application prior to it.
Yeah,
coming here.
there's one development, I won't go into the details, but there's one developer I know of that when we basically said, no, we're not doing this, they said, fine, then we'll just go ahead and do the development, but we won't do a metro district. Another developer really urged us to do it, and we said, we're not going. We're not going to the council with this, and that's still, a pending decision out there. But generally, it's staff who puts up the wall and says, we're not even going to recommend this because it doesn't make any sense to us.
Okay, thank you.
Based upon the policy
Based on
declarations
policy.
that we've
Yeah,
made as
absolutely,
council.
Absolutely.
Councilmember Goff, one of your questions was the validity of the financing. Each one of these is usually a public financing tool, so it goes through a public offering, and professional financing companies are hired, D.A. Davidson, Stiefel, companies like that, to validate the assumptions that are being put in long before they even take it to the market. We're a review of that. We don't get involved in any of those decision-making. We just review it to see if it makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
For my sense, this has been good as a reminder of how these things work and what they are. Yes, I do think that for the most part, people get good notice of what, their additional costs are going to be as being part of these. I'm sure Mr. Devon was when he bought his home in his neighborhood, because he's... I hope not. But, so I like our current philosophy of, yes, it makes sense in commercial districts because that's, fine business can pay for it, and that's, that's appropriate, and they're more sophisticated and understand the consequences. But for either mixed use or purely residential, I like that we have a pretty high bar before somebody gets to it. I guess my remaining question is, do we need to better define that bar in terms of, and I guess I would look for more staff input. We're not going to make that decision tonight, but if you think that there's some loose ends that we ought to tie up, I'd be curious in seeing what those are, and so that we could incorporate those into our policies so that we don't have, open-ended questions down the road. But generally, while they have a good value and while they certainly can be beneficial for the neighborhood and the overall community, there's reasons that we sort of put a governor on it to keep them down to an appropriate number. Mr. McGough?
Yes, I think Mr. Ray made the suggestion or asked whether we would be interested in staff bringing back any language for some possible updates or revisions to the ordinance, and I guess we might want to give him an answer to that question.
So my sense is,
yes,
we don't want to change the ordinance
right,
or the policies,
nope, the policy
but better define the basis that would justify allowing a metropolitan district in a residential area. Does that sound good to people?
Yeah,
and Mr. Mayor, if I may, while we've spent a lot of time talking about the regionally significant, there are other exceptions.
Right.
And I would just ask if there are other areas of merit in a non-commercial sense that the council would want to consider, or, I mean, you have opportunities for affordable housing, or you have opportunities for transit, specifically transit, that may not, or areas that are designated as regional urban centers, as distinct from redevelopment. I mean, there are other exceptions that, at least to my knowledge, have never been utilized.
But we've got them within ours.
Yeah,
On
the ones
some
I
of
just
them.
mentioned probably would not fit, especially if there was something in the affordable housing type of it. But it's, at least a policy question to contemplate.
Well, as we have continued discussions on attainable or affordable housing, that might be something that
Could be
you
a tool.
use as a tool and bring it to us at that time as one of the tools to consider.
So I think, speaking on behalf of my colleagues, we'd certainly be pleased to come back and offer some thoughts on better definitions and perhaps some other policy considerations. So
Great.
thank you very much for your time. We
Thank
appreciate
you all.
Thank you, yeah.
Okay, Mr. Dev, anything else to come before us tonight?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we stand adjourned. Thank you all.
He is adjourned.